Hello, 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 hello. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back, stopping by. Now, let's get right into it. Today I'm going to be looking at Judges chapters 19 and 20. I might also go into 21. I don't know. I don't really want to spend too much time doing this video. So, this is about the story of the unnamed woman who was brutally gang raped. So, this is going to be a sensitive topic that I'm going to take a look at and read. And, I want to be careful in the things that I say. So just let you know from now. If this is too sensitive for you, too stressful for you, then this is not the video for you. Because I don't know. I don't know what has happened to you, happened in your life, what you have experienced, or who you may have known has went through something similar to this. And so I just want to put that out there first and foremost before I go any further and any deeper. I'm letting you know this is going to be a topic that has to deal with misogyny, rape, death, and then war, civil war. Okay, before I get into it, just want to quickly pray. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for your word, that you preserve your word through the passage of time. You have it here for us to see, to look back at, to see what happened in history, to see what happened in times past. Yes, but also for us to learn from it, grow from it, be better, Lord God, and to see how you responded in these ancient days, how you reacted, what was your action to these horrific things that men has did. So Father, whatever it is that you want us to get from this story, from these horrific past events, I pray that you'll open up our understanding, open up our eyes to see your truth and how to apply your word, your truth to our current day situations and lives. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. Gaia Journal. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And this article was written by a sister named Christine Mafana. And she's also going to make a couple commentary statements on Judges 19. And I like what she said. Some of the things that I read here, I'm like, you know what? I want to share that with you guys. So she goes on to say, the value of a cultural context can often get lost in translation. True. When translating another people's way of life, language often fails us as it does not give the necessary equivalents. True. The story of the concubine in Judges 19 is an example of value lost in translation. The word concubine is often associated with sexually explicit relationships. However, in some cultures like my own, concubine can represent a lower status wife who has not received the bride price. This becomes a challenge to translate as Western cultures do not have the bride price marriage system. The understanding of this story can be enriched when one understands the full value of the unnamed woman in this passage. Okay. She goes on to say that unlike most stories in the Bible, in which we can find a more polite and diluted way to teach the story in Sunday school, Judges 19 has no such luck. There is no triumph for God, nope, and his people, and no hero to admire. Absolutely, that's true. There's no hero here. Perhaps the most unfortunate part of reading this story is that it has no happy ending to come. Oh, yes. There is no happy ending in this story. And this is the last 3 chapters in the book of Judges I'll be reading from. And there's no happy ending. Goes on to say, Perhaps, okay, so yeah, I read that part. Perhaps the most unfortunate part of reading the story is that it has no happy ending to come. The story only leads to unspeakable tragedy. Readers of this story have tried to find a way to make sense of this text, but the question is how? How do we explain this text? And even more complicated, what do we take from this text? In my own attempt to better understand this text of terror, I have reviewed numerous scholarly interpretations and perspectives on how this story can be read and the context these readings hold for readers. And I agree with her. I had to do the same thing as well, because when I looked at it, I was like, wait a minute. God, where are you in this? This was like tragedy upon tragedy. And yeah, I was looking for the Lord in this. It goes on to say, in addition to these scholarly text interpretations, I added my own understanding of the text from my own cultural text as a Zimbabwe American woman. Sister Christine goes on to say that all the scholarly perspectives that I have read have helped my understanding of the story. However, I think I have a unique perspective because a concubine is not a foreign concept to me, but one that is familiar from the culture of Zimbabwe, a cultural context I know well. In the Shona culture, when a woman is to be married, her husband must partake in the ritual of paying her bride price. This bride price is a way of showing both the groom's and bride's family that there is a union between the two and it should be honored. Without this union in my culture, a woman who lives with a man and then considered a concubine, I believe that's a typo. I believe it should have I believe it was meant to say is then considered a concubine. My paternal grandmother never received her bride price from my grandfather. Although they had a family together and my grandfather had no other wife, she felt dishonored because her family could not claim that they received her bride price. On her deathbed, she cursed my grandfather because he had failed to provide her bride price. Wow, this is a serious thing to these folks, man. I can only imagine that the concubine must have felt the same anger. Her husband went all the way to her father's house, and he did not bring an offering or gratitude for her family. She may not have been a dishonor to her family, but in the notion that she was an unpaid bride would have brought discomfort to her family. In conclusion, there are many questions that come with trying to understand Judges 19. True. However, I have found the story carries more meaning when it is given cultural context. Thank you, Christine. The Euro-American perspectives on Judges 19 miss the cultural context that could assist us in making sense of the story in our present time. That is why I like to look for other sources to help in understanding these, like she said, these cultural issues and contexts, right? Because we're living in the 20th century, and life is totally different for us now in the 20th century. Okay, even for those people who still live in that land, life is totally different now. You know, a lot of things have changed, and a lot of advancement has come to these different nations. All right. So I appreciate when I come upon and I find nuggets like these that I can bring and share with you, because it helps bring the Bible a bit more closer to help, you know, how I'm trying to say it. It helps us to understand a lot better what was life like in ancient times, because a lot of people today still do hold on to certain culture practices and traditions. Okay, let's continue. Awareness of diverse traditions involving marriage and bride prices outside of Europe and North America allows African exegetes to make fresh contributions to biblical studies. Here, cultural awareness leads to a different appreciation of the female character in Judges 19. The woman who was ravaged may not have been an adulteress. The Greek version of the text suggests that she was the party upset. The woman may only have been a wife of secondary status. Her husband's humiliation about being abandoned by a wife of a low status economically may have led him to eject the woman when his reputation was further at risk. Lack of awareness of bride price traditions and status markers lead to impoverished readings of Judges 19. Awareness of these realities allows us to return to the woman with dignity befitting her story. In Judges 19, chapter 19, verses 20 to 30, the story takes a turn for the worse. However, a group of men who are described as being wicked call out to the old man so that he would bring out his guests for their own pleasure. The old man refuses and offers instead his own virgin daughter and the concubine in place of the male guests. The concubine is given to the men to do as they please with her as they please with her, granted with the permission of her husband. The wicked men continue to gang rape her until the morning, when they release her. In Judges 19, verse 26, a strange thing happens in the translation. No longer does the author refer to the man as a husband, but a master. At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. For the remainder of the story, the NRSV translation uses the word master in place of husband. This leads to the matter as to where she is a wife of lesser status or a sexual slave to this man. In Death and Dissymmetry, Meek-Bell suggests a translation of the Hebrew word pelegish can be taken out of context because the original word used to describe the woman can be taken out of context because of different cultural ideas. The Euro-American cultural idea of a concubine often is understood to mean slave by Old Testament scholars. But Baal refutes the notion because the texts don't necessarily communicate this idea. She points out that in most texts, the term appears to mean a wife or lower status. She also argues this position since the man had shown emotional attachment by going to retrieve her from her father's house. Baal then goes on to say her status as a wife is shown through the fact that her rape is seen as an offense against her husband, serious enough to warrant war. Although Baal points out the importance of the man's affection to the woman early in the story, I think her analysis lacks appropriate criticism of the actual act of releasing the concubine to the men outside. Exactly. How can we perceive that cruel act in a way that still allows one to posit a husband and wife relationship? Exactly. A better background and explanation of what it would mean to be a concubine in this period of time is given in analysis by Gail Yee in Judges and Method, New Approach in Biblical Studies. She focuses on kinship and marriage and how the marriage system worked in this society. She explains that a concubine was a woman whose continued presence within the family was not dependent upon economic arrangements. A concubine would be a secondary wife and could be used to produce more offspring, or if the man already had offspring, she was used for sexual pleasure. A more unique approach that Yee brings in the economic value of the concubine. In ancient society, if a man could not bear children with his wife, a concubine may be used to obtain an heir because she does not threaten the economic basis of their marriage. Very, very similar, if not. Actually, that's what happened with Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar. Okay. Let's continue. The concubine essentially was not considered an heir to any of the wealth because she did not possess the same status of her children. Another perspective that helps clarify the misunderstood realities of this story is from Ken Stone, So Miss Christine is using another another person's perspective on it, right? Because we're still trying to understand what is going on here, right? And that's fine. We want to look at as much resource as possible to help us get an understanding. I don't have a problem with that. Another perspective that helps clarify the misunderstood realities of this story is from Ken Stone. Stone examines the selection by focusing on Judges 19, verse 2, and by asking the question how exactly the woman had been unfaithful. The Hebrew version suggests that she had prostituted herself, which implies sexual unfaithfulness. However, the Greek version states instead that the woman became angry. Stone analyzes how the term prostitution can have a different meaning by saying that the woman's prostitution does not refer to literal sexual infidelity, but is a sort of metaphor for the fact that she leaves her husband. The act that she left her husband and returned home is in itself culturally considered unacceptable in this time. The author suggests this may be why such harsh language is used to address the woman. Another question readers may pose when reading this text is why the host decides to offer the woman instead of his male guest. Why not offer a male servant or relative? The host was willing to sacrifice the dignity of the two women for the protection of a male guest. Stone sheds light on why the host chooses to do this by saying, apparently, the sexual violation of women was considered less shameful than that of men. Wow, that's terrible. That's terrible. It should have been equal. Both is a shame. To violate. You violate a woman, should have been as equal as you if you violate a man. So here is a generation in time and a culture in time that we're seeing in the Bible that looked at women lesser in every way. That's terrible. It's terrible. But Jesus came along and he did not treat women like this. He was not a misogynist. He did not oppress and suppress women. No, he did not. Thank God for Jesus. Goes on to say, at least in the eyes of other men, such an attitude reflects both the social subordination of women and the fact that homosexual rape was viewed as particularly severe attack on male honor. It saddens me to think a man would offer his own daughter, I know, it saddens me too, before putting a male stranger into harm's way. These guys were punks. This is a great example of the misogynistic culture and the mistreatment of women in that particular time. Yes. In Judges and Method, Gail Yee more elaborately explains the inconsistency in translation in which the relationship between the concubine and the man changes from that of a husband to a master. As we already know, concubines are associated with being secondary or lower status wives. Yee explains how the secondary status can result in a more inferior relationship to a husband than if she were a wife. Even though wives have to be in subordination to their husbands, the Pelegesh endures a double subordination in her position as secondary wife. The inferior status of the woman in our story is particularly foregrounded after the rape. When the text describes her husband as master, Yee then goes on to discuss how the concubine brought dishonor on her husband by leaving. The concubine's decision to leave shows a lack of control from her husband that would indicate an honor and shame society of ancient Mediterranean public humiliation. The humiliation is even greater felt because of the status of the woman, as he notes. Moreover, the extent of a man's disgrace correlates inversely with the status of the one who shames him. The lower the status, the greater the shame. Also sounds like classism going on here. Goes on to say, having been humiliated once, the Levite would not have been humiliated again by being taken by men for sex. The act of being raped by men would show submission, a state that is associated with feminine. Feeling shamed and feminized by his secondary wife and her father, the Levite is in danger of becoming even more humiliated and emasculated by the degenerate men. This could give insight into why he does not stand up and protest the giving away of his wife to the strange men. In a selfish act, he was trying to keep his own dignity. All right, so real quick. Judges. What is Judges about? Judges. Let's get some backstory very quickly. I will be doing a lot of reading, okay? I'll be doing a lot of reading. So bear with me. If that's not your thing, then I'm sorry. I'm reading from the ESV, English Standard Version. I just want to read it from this version, just to get it as close as possible to our vernacular language and understanding. It's just raw. It's raw. At this time, before Israel had a king, there was a man of the tribe of Levi, living on the far side of the hill country of Ephraim, who brought home a girl from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine. But she became angry with him and ran away, and returned to her father's home in Bethlehem, and was there about 4 months. Then her husband, taking along a servant and an extra donkey, went to see her to try to win her back again. When he arrived at her home, she let him in and introduced him to her father, who was delighted to meet him. Her father urged him to stay a while, so he stayed 3 days, and they all had a very pleasant time. On the 4th day, they were up early. This is the Levi and his concubine. Up early, ready to leave, but the girl's father insisted on their having breakfast first. Then he pleaded with him to stay one more day, as they were having such a good time. At first, the man refused, but his father-in-law kept urging him until finally he gave in. The next morning, they were up early again, and again the girl's father pleaded, "Stay just today, and leave sometime this evening." So they had another day of feasting. That afternoon, as he and his wife, which is interesting, right? Because at the beginning of this chapter, 19, she's identified at the end of verse 1 as a concubine. But verse 9, that afternoon as he and his wife, now she's identified as a wife, and servant were preparing to leave, his father-in-law said, "Look, it's getting late. Stay just tonight, and we will have a pleasant evening together. And tomorrow you can get up early and be on your way." But this time, the man was adamant. That's the Levi. So they left, getting as far as Jerusalem, also called Jebus, before dark. Right, so before Jerusalem was, as we know it today, called Jerusalem, back then, this time, that era, it was called Jebus. Verse 11, his servant said to him, "It's getting too late to travel. Let's stay here tonight." "No," his master said. "We can't stay in this heathen city where there are no Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah, or possibly Ramah." So they went on. The sun was setting just as they came to Gibeah, a village of the tribe of Benjamin. So they went there for the night. But as no one invited them in, they camped in the village square. Just then, an old man came by on his way home from his work in the fields. He was originally from the hill country of Ephraim, but was living now in Gibeah. So this older gentleman who was coming from work, he was from Ephraim as the Levite. So these are two fellow countrymen. They don't know each other, but they just have that in common. Okay. When he saw the travelers camped in the square, he asked them where they were from and where they were going. "We're on our way from Bethlehem in Judah," the man replied. "I live on the far edge of the Ephraim hill country, near Shiloh, but no one has taken us in for the night." So what's funny about this is I was watching a video from Drew. Let me tell you real quick. I watched a video just last night where Drew, his name is, he went to, bear with me, Drew Binsky. You should check him out sometime. The guy has traveled just about everywhere in the world. And he went to the world's hottest city, 140 degrees. And I believe it's Jakarta. Let me make sure. I'm sorry, Johar, Kuwait.
Many places claim to be the hottest in the world, such as Iran's Lut Desert, California's Death Valley, and Algeria's Sahara. But those places are all very remote. As far as cities go, no place on the planet is more scorching than Jahra in central Kuwait.
So I wanted to lift out this part of his video because, when reading Judges 19, I get it, I understand it. With the whole, they're traveling, they're out in, somewhere where they're not familiar with, but it's getting late and they need to now rest, right? Well, this is the hospitality that they would have probably met back in those days. Most likely, yes. And it was expected. Strangers just passing through, to be hospitable, right? So here we go.
He accepted to welcome us, and he said there is no any problem. Even he don't need to call the owner to ask for his permission for us to stay.
That's very
and all of us are welcome
Fair
anytime.
Use. By the way, Drew, appreciate your video. Appreciate your beautiful work here. Thank you so much. So I give you credit for it. I do not own this video, but fair use.
As long as you want to stay, you can stay. That's a normal guy that we never met him before.
This really shows the hospitality of the Kuwaiti people. They're so
This is
welcoming.
Drew.
It's literally 1 a.m. We knocked on the freaking door of this guy's bed. He was middle of sleeping. He woke up. He's like, "What's going on?" And now, 5 minutes later, he's making us a bed.
This guy, he's one of the people in the neighborhood. He saw our cars, and he came here to check on his neighborhood.
Hi, how are you? Hi.
So
thank you.
And he's asking us to join him at his place, which is next to here. And he said everything is ready, food and coffee and everything, because he's already here. And he would like us to join him onto his camp. And this guy who is already prepared the place for us in this camp. I don't know this guy and I never met him.
Pretty amazing. I'm taking Solomon out of his comfort zone in his own country. He wants me to sleep in the desert. No, man. Are you sure? This is what we do in August in Kuwait. We find random people, knock on doors, and sleep. Solomon, come here. Have you ever done this before?
I've done it in the winter, but not in the middle of August, man.
You can go back to sleep. I'm sorry for bothering you. In general, there's no danger here in Kuwait. In the desert.
So there you have it. Okay, so back to verse 18. "We're on the way home from Bethlehem in Judah." The man replied, "I live on the far edge of the Ephraim hill country near Shiloh, but no one has taken us in for the night. So what I just showed you in that last clip, that's an example of what is happening here. They were traveling through the night. They needed a place to rest, but no one was hospitable except for this one guy. And it goes on to say, but no one has taken us in for the night. Verse 19, even though we have fodder for our donkeys and plenty of food and wine for ourselves. Don't worry, the old man said. Be my guest. And I remember when I read that, what the song that came to my mind was from, was it Beauty and the Beast? Be our guest, put your magic to the test, all your wonders and your worries. Yeah, that's what came to my mind. But anyway, and so he says, be my guest, for you mustn't stay here in the square. It's too dangerous. Sounds familiar? Sounds like we've heard that somewhere before. All right, well, on. Soon get interesting. So he took them home with him. This is the old man. He fed their donkeys while they rested, and afterward they had supper together. Just as they were beginning to warm to the occasion, here we go. A gang of sex perverts gathered around the house and began beating at the door and yelling at the old man to bring out the man who was staying with him so they could rape him. The old man stepped outside to talk to them. Let me stop there. Does this sound familiar to you? Where have we seen something like this happen before? Well, let's take a look at Genesis chapter 19. It's interesting how, these two share that, Genesis 19 and Judges 19, they share similar stories with sex-crazed men beating down somebody's door because they saw strangers, visitors going to a home, and they want to rape these strangers who happen to be men. And so we're going to begin at verse let's just begin at verse 1. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. See, he's being hospitable. Then you may rest up early and go on your way. They said, No. These are the two angels. But Lot didn't know they were angels. If you didn't see that video that I did on this, Lot chose the wrong Lot, go check it out. They said, No, we will spend the night in the town square. But he pressed them strongly, that is Lot. So they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Verse 4. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house. Sounds familiar now? So he took them home with him. I'm back in Judges. He took them home with him. He fed their donkeys while they rested, and afterward they had supper together. Verse 22. Just as they were beginning to warm to the occasion, a gang of sex perverts gathered around the house. So in both stories, there's a mob or a gang of sex-crazed perverts going to a house, demanding that the guests, the visitors who showed up at said house, be brought out to them, sent out to them, so that they can have sexual relations with them, and not in a pleasant way, by the way. That's wild. I'm back in Genesis now. I'm reading from Genesis again. It goes on to say, um, where all the men who came. So, sorry. Verse 5. And they called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them. Lot went out to meet the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, my brothers. I wouldn't even call these people my brothers. But anyway, that's Lot. Do not act so wickedly. Verse 8. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. Let me get back into Judges. And let's go to verse 23. The old man stepped outside to talk to them. No, my brothers, don't do such a dastardly act, he begged, for he is my guest. Here, take my virgin daughter and this man's wife. No matter how many times I read this, I still have the same reaction. What? Okay. Keep it together. Come on, calm down. I gotta calm down because it's crazy. Here is a man saying, here's my daughter. Take my daughter and take the man wife. You can't have them or rape them off. Do what you want with them. Number one, these sex-crazed lunatics, they didn't come for a female. They came for a man. And that reminded me of, an episode in Boondocks. What was it? It's called Booty Warrior. Oh my goodness. Goes on to say, I'll bring them out and you can do whatever you like to them, but don't do such a thing to this man. He is repeating word for word what Lot had said to that mob. So clearly he's heard the story of Lot and probably thought it was going to work out the same way for him. He should have known, though, that there was no angels. It was just this Levi man, his wife, and the servant, which, by the way, we don't hear and we don't know what happened to the servant. The servant just dropped right off the page of scriptures. After he said in verse 11, his servant said to him, it's getting too late to travel. Let's stay here tonight. Verse 12 and 13, no, his master said, we can't stay in this heathen city where there are no Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah or possibly to Ramah. We don't hear no more of the servant in this story anymore, talking to this man. So anyway, verse 25, but they wouldn't listen to him. They wouldn't listen to the older gentleman. Then the girl's husband, so this is what he did. Husband pushed her out to them, and they abused her all night, taking turns raping her until the morning. This was a gang rape. Finally, just at dawn, they let her go. She fell down at the door of the house, and lay there until it was light. She lay there until it was light. When her husband opened the door to be on his way, he found her there, fallen down in front of the door with her hands digging into the threshold. Well, come on, he said. Let's get going. Sir, you threw your wife out to these wolves who really wanted you. They wanted your body. And you pushed her out there. Didn't care one bit about her safety, her life. And now it's daylight and you telling her to get up, let's go. Not even a, are you okay? Oh my goodness. But there was no answer, for she was dead. So he threw her across the donkey's back and took her home. When he got there, he took a knife and cut her body into 12 parts and sent one piece to each tribe of Israel. So when I read that part, it reminded me of, I seen a documentary on Amin Dada, Idi Amin Dada. If you don't know who that is, you might want to check out this documentary to get familiarized with who this, to me, that this was a walking, living, breathing, silverback gorilla demon. You know, he looked like a human, but this man was a silverback demon. Because he did something quite similar as well with one of his wives. Check it out. Fair use.
It is 12:30 p.m. Amin has just learned something that has made him furious. His 3 wives have been partying all night with their bodyguards. Neglected by their husband, they wanted to provoke him, but could not have imagined the risk they were taking. Amin will not tolerate this insult and decides to take revenge. He rushes to the radio station to reveal the indecent behavior of his wives to the whole country. He shouts, "My wives are unfaithful. They have betrayed me. They have destroyed my political work. I repudiate them. I divorce them this very day. They must leave the house." On hearing these declarations, the 3 wives hurriedly pack their suitcases and flee from the house to escape Amin's anger. When they come home from school, the children don't understand what's happening.
I remember we are preparing to come back home. So when we came from school, we found that my mother and her stepmothers, they weren't at home. Then they told us with the maids, "Hey, where is mommy?" They said, "No, they've packed up their things, they've gone." So we were shocked. You see, and even you couldn't even ask our father, because also he was just looking at us. We were fearing to ask. Yeah, we were at school.
A few months later, Malyamu, Babi's mother, was badly hurt in an accident. She managed to escape from Uganda and take refuge in London. Her daughter would not see her again for more than 30 years. Nora was spared for political reasons. She belongs to a tribe that Amin is persecuting. He spares her to absolve himself of all responsibility. Kay would not be as lucky. A year later, she was found cut to pieces in the trunk of a car. The children found out about this horror on television.
We were playing out. So they called us to go and take a shower. Then our sisters came running and said, "Oh, you come and watch on the television. Mama, no, Mama K also is dead." So the sister, my sister Kide, is the firstborn of Mama K. She started crying. Then she was cut in pieces. It was very hard. It was very hard for us. It was something strange.
It is the Minister of Health himself who was ordered by Amin to have the victim's body sewn back together.
He directed that the body be sewn, the parts be sewn back the way they should have been, which we did at the hospital. The children had to go to see the body of their mother. It's a very traumatic experience for them at that age.
Amin takes advantage of the event for a macabre display. He has Kay's stitched-up body exposed in front of the hospital for all the crowd to see, and even forces her own children to look at it. In front of everyone, he shouts, "Your mother, you see, was a loose woman. Look at what happened." This is how those who blaspheme against Allah are punished. Babi Salamshida still remembers the moment when she saw her stepbrothers and sisters come home from the hospital.
They were just crying and happy. They were no longer playing with us. And sometimes they say that we miss our mother. For you, you have your mother. For us, we don't have we no longer have any mother.
Goes on to say, when he got there, he took a knife, this is verse 29, and cut her body into 12 parts and sent one piece to each tribe of Israel. Verse 30. Then the entire nation was roused to action against the men of Benjamin. Because of this awful deed, there hasn't been such a horrible crime since Israel left Egypt. Everyone said, we've got to do something about it. So now let's get on over to chapter 20. This story just gets more and more sadder, just upsets you still, upsets me still. Chapter 20, verse 1. Then the entire nation of Israel sent the leaders and 450,000 troops to assemble with one mind before the Lord at Mizpah. They came from as far away as Dan and Beersheba, and everywhere between and from across the Jordan in the land of Gilead. Word of the mobilization of the Israeli forces at Mizpah soon reached the land of Benjamin. Now I want to stop and say this real quick. I remember when I used to live in New York, and I would, be on Jamaica Ave. I would see these Hebrew Israelites, and they would have this chart that showed allegedly who the 12 tribes are today, ethnic wise. And on that chart, and they would say too that Jamaicans, it's not funny, are from the tribe of Benjamin. So I never really looked into it. Never did. But let's do that right now. See what we find. So, according to Israel United in Christ, right? And I mean, should we even be listening to them? Should we even be taking counseling from them? No, right? But just for the fun of it, according to Israel United in Christ, the tribe of Benjamin belongs to West Indies, along with Judah and Levi, were sold into captivity by the Africans and the Arabs to the white man. Now I'm going to take a look at Encyclopedia Britannica. According to the biblical tradition, one of the 12 tribes that constituted the people of Israel, that's Benjamin, and one of the 2 tribes along with Judah that later became the Jewish people. The tribe was named after the younger of the 2 children born to Jacob, also called Israel, and his second wife Rachel. Let me see what else I can find for you. Benjamites in the southern kingdom of Judah were assimilated by the more powerful tribe of Judah and gradually lost their identity. Modern Jews thus consider themselves to be descendants of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, or are classed as Levites to indicate an affinity with the religious functionaries who at one time exercised the priesthood in ancient Israel. Saul, the first of Israel's king, and St. Paul, or the Apostle Paul, were both of the tribe of Benjamin. Right? So there's a little history there for you. I'll take a look at one more. Oh, two more. I'm going to take a look at two more. Give me a moment. So according to this chart here, the 12 tribes of Israel, they're listed all here. I'm only going to read, matter of fact, I'll show you. So, allegedly, this is what they say, but here we are. Well, Jamaicans, so-called Jamaicans, West Indies, I don't even know what that even means, so-called Jamaicans, West Indies, Trinidadians, and so right here, the tribe of Benjamin, Jamaicans, West Indies, Trinidadians. So, yeah, there you have it, folks. Yeah. I really don't get into this, which tribe am I from? Honestly, I don't care. I just want Jesus. Okay? I just want the Rock of all ages, the King of kings, the Lord of lords. Right? I am me want. I am me I serve. I don't really care about, I really don't. I don't care about, well, do I belong, because I'm Jamaican, do I belong to that tribe, that tribe? Me no care. Me just want to know, say, me and Father God, we're in good standing. I'm in good standing with the Lord. That I have a relationship with the Lord. Okay? That's it. That my sins are forgiven. I've been blood bought, washed by the sacrifice that Jesus did on that cross on Calvary. So I don't care for this, but it was just interesting. I just remember that. That's all. I just remember that, and I just kind of want to just touch on that a little bit. It's just funny because because what I'm about to read next, you'll see. Let's get back into it. So it goes on to say, verse 4. We arrived one evening. This is the man. This is the man who was of the tribe of Levi. Okay, he's gonna tell the people here, the chiefs of Israel. They now. So let's go back. I'm sorry. In verse 3 of chapter 20, word of the mobilization of the Israeli forces at Mizpah soon reached the land of Benjamin. Okay. So the land of Benjamin, those rapists, they're from Benjamin. Okay. They heard that an ensuing war, an army is going to be coming to them. And here's the story now. So we arrived one evening at Gibeah, a village in Benjamin. He began, this is what the man, Levi. That night, the men of Gibeah surrounded the house, planning to kill me, and they raped my wife until she was dead. That's not what happened. So he's not being forthright and truthful about what happened. That's not what happened. What happened was, if you remember chapter 19, in verse 22, just as they were beginning to warm to the occasion, a gang of sex perverts gathered around the house and began beating at the door and yelling at the old man to bring out the man. Didn't say bring out the woman, said bring out the man. Didn't say bring out your daughter, old man, said bring out the man who was staying with him. Why? So they could rape him. That's what happened. But over here in chapter 20, he's telling a different story. So he's saying that, they planned to kill him and they raped his wife until she was dead. So here's my question. So if they planned to kill you, bro, they didn't kill you. Clearly they didn't kill you. This is a mob. So how did you get away untouched? Not one piece of your hair fell to the ground. But your wife was the only one who suffered at their hands. That right there is telling you that he's telling this to the chief of Israel. He's telling when he went back home, and he's telling it to, the leaders there, giving them a rendition of the story. Somebody should have been like, hold up, but how did you get away without one hair falling? So, were you able to fight them off? Okay, I'm just saying, I'm just asking questions. And it goes on to say that, so he says in verse 6, so I cut her body into 12 pieces and sent the pieces throughout the land of Israel. For these men have committed a terrible crime. Yes, it was a terrible crime what they did. But, my guy, you cut up your wife. You cut her up. You don't see something wrong with that too? Ah, man, now you see why I titled the video what I titled it. These people in that day, in that time, that era, they were crazy. Even when they had opportunity to do right and just tell the truth, they couldn't even do that. He couldn't even just do that. It goes on to say, so I cut her body into 12 pieces and sent the pieces throughout the land of Israel, for these men have committed a terrible crime. Now then, sons of Israel, express your mind and give me your counsel. And as one man they replied, they all agreed, not one of us will return home until we have punished the village of Gibeah. 1/10 of the army will be selected by lot as a supply line to bring us food, and the rest of us will destroy Gibeah for this terrible deed. You know what's happening here? Jungle justice. They say, all right, we are going to march over to Gibeah and we're going to mash them up. What they did to your wife is unacceptable. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to sit by and just mourn and that's it. No, we'll go for them. So, verse 11. So the whole nation united in this task. Then the messengers were sent to the tribe of Benjamin asking, did you know about the terrible thing that was done among you? Okay. Give up these evil men from the city of Gibeah so that we can execute them and purge Israel of her evil. I agree with that. I agree with that. They want to hold those responsible for what had happened to that woman. They want to bring them to the law, which there was none. But, they want to bring them to court so they can have the day in court and charge them. Here's the crime. Here's what you did wrong. We're going to hold you accountable. You're going to be punished. You're being judged. So the messengers went to Gibeah and said, hey, listen, these men are here. They're here in your city. Pretty much a warrant. There we go. A warrant was sent for their arrest. Thank you, Holy Spirit. So it says, and not only that, not only were they going to be arrested, it says so that we can execute them. Execute them. This reminds me of a lot of things that happen in, I'm going to speak for my nation, where I'm from, Jamaica. I'm sure somebody else from other countries, other nations, other islands can relate. But this reminds me of a lot of things that goes on in Jamaica where you have a lot of vile, murderers, criminals who do some very vile things. And you know, you have the citizens are watching to see how is the law, the courts are going to handle said person who did such vile act, whatever it was. And oftentimes, just about all the times, especially that last horrific thing that happened last year, it wasn't the last, but it made national headlines across the country, where that young man, Rushian Barnett, I believe his name is, where he took the lives of his cousin, a female, and her 4 daughters. So 5 persons, this one young man, massacred by himself. I mean, it was terrible what he did. And the nation was crying and was pleading with the judicial court to execute him. They felt that he deserved the death penalty, and they did not. Instead, he was charged and found guilty and will be serving life in prison. The people wasn't happy. The people wasn't happy. And the talk of the town was, had it been, had they been left up to it to capture that young man, they would have given him their jungle justice. So that's what's happening here.
Is seeking the death penalty against Roshane Barnett following the gruesome killing of a mother and her 4 children in Cocoa Peace, Clarendon. Barnett wore a look of surprise and contemplation as he read the notice served to him in court. The last time someone was sentenced to death was in 1988, 34 years ago. In a statement issued Tuesday afternoon, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution explained what led to the decision. The provisions of Section 3.1 of the Offences Against the Person Act states that every person who falls within Section 3.1a shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life or to death. The provisions under Section 3.1a include persons who are convicted for multiple murders which arise out of the same incident. When asked if he had anything to say, the 23-year-old brought up his ill treatment while in custody. He says he's being constantly threatened and beaten by officers and is seeking medical attention. He said to the presiding judge, "Me no know if I the crime me commit, a beer chat them a chat me, licking a head back, them a tell me how them we lick me with baton and them something there." As he was being transported out of the court, Barnett was met with animosity by citizens who jeered as he passed. Barnett is charged with the murder of 31-year-old Kimisha Wright, Kimanda Smith, who was 15 years old, 10-year-old Shara Lee Smith, Rafaela Smith, who was 5, and Kishawn Henry, 23 months old. It was explained that after Barnett inflicted wounds on the 5 deceased, he deposited the murder weapon and other items some distance away from the premises. The prosecution indicated that the knife and those items have been retrieved. Barnett will reappear in court on Friday, July 22. Between now and then, legal representation will be settled for him as well as a psychiatric evaluation done. I'm Janelle Powell for CVM Live.
That's what's happening here. By the way, he has, from what I've last heard, he has since given his life to Jesus Christ. So there you go. God's ways is not our ways, and God's plans is not our plans. So that's between him and the Lord, right? It doesn't sound good. It doesn't look good. That you might not like that. Nobody, the majority of, even a lot of believers, believe it or not, even a lot of Christians do not, like that he's still alive. He did not suffer. There was no judgment. The only thing that he got out of it was, you're just going to be in jail for the rest of your life. Many persons believe that he should have been executed for that heinous crime that he did. Right? He didn't chop up, these persons that he, stole lives from, like what this man did. This Levi man, this man from Levi, tribe of Levi, he cut up his wife. Which I don't understand. How's that solving anything? But it did entice Israel to now running upon Gibeah. And it goes on to say, but the people of Benjamin wouldn't listen. They didn't want to give up. They did not want to hand over the mob that did this to this woman. Excuse me. It also reminded me of a video that I did about the young lady, Deborah, who, that student, that university student, college student, I forget where in Africa the story came from, but I did a video on it. And, you know, a mob, they killed her. You know, and when the truth finally came out, the truth was that she had turned down the advance of one of the students, and one of the students is a male fellow classmate of hers, and she's a Christian. This young man is not. He's a Muslim, and he just couldn't take no for an answer. Kind of similar to what I saw earlier. I saw a headline earlier, but it was pretty much about a college student shot and killed this young lady because she also turned down his advance. Here, I can find it. His advances as well. Right here. Let me show you. Right here, this one. He threw away his life. Alabama basketball player arrested and charged with capital murder. Right? For shooting girl who rejected him. Yeah. So with Deborah's story, she was killed. I did a video on that already. You can go check it out if you want. I really don't want to go back there because none of this, everything that I'm saying, none of this is a good story. But it just shows you that there's nothing new that happens under the sun. This just happens, and it is just oh boy, this is tough, man. This is tough. But I want to share this. I want to look at this. I want to go over it. So it says, but the people of Benjamin wouldn't listen. Instead of 26,000 of them arrived in Gibeah to join the 700. So 26 and 700, that's 31,000. And you know what happened? I'll tell you what happened. To join the 700 local men in their defense against the rest of Israel. Remember now, Israel had 450,000 men ready to go to war. So 31,000 of these Gibeons were like, all right, let's go then. And so it goes on to say, among all these were 700 men who were left-handed sharpshooters. Okay, these were your snipers, in other words. They could hit a target within a hair's breadth, never missing. That's pretty. 700, they don't miss. That's 100% accuracy. The army of Israel, not counting the men of Benjamin, numbered 400,000 men. Before the battle, the Israeli army went to Bethel first to ask counsel from God. Okay, so now they want to get God involved. They want to ask God for direction, guidance, and how should they go about this, right? So they want to seek God. Okay. Which tribe shall lead us against the people of Benjamin? They asked. And the Lord replied, Judah shall go first. Now you see when I read earlier about Judah and how, where was it? Judah and Benjamin, how Judah pretty much took over Benjamin. I think I read that in the Britannica, right? Yeah, I did read that in the Britannica. right here, Benjamites in the southern kingdom of Judah were assimilated by the more powerful tribe of Judah. This is history. This is history. Here's the word of God. Here's the Encyclopedia Britannica. But, Anyway. And so he goes on to say, and the Lord replied, Judah shall go first. All right, so Judah is going to lead the army into battle against Gibeah. So the entire army left early the next morning to go to Gibeah to attack the men of Benjamin. But the men defending the village stormed out and killed 22,000 Israelis that day. Then the Israeli army wept before the Lord until evening and asked him, shall we fight further against our brother Benjamin? These are brothers. Okay? The 12 tribes are all family. They're all brothers, just different. They just broke into different, well, they didn't really break into because they're just their own people. They're the same people, but you understand, like I have 2 sons, but my 2 sons going to have their families. That's their 2 separate families for my 2 sons, but they're all family. My 2 sons are brothers, and their children will be cousins. So it makes sense why we're reading here when Judah goes back into prayer and asks the Lord, shall we continue fight against our brother Benjamin? And the Lord said, yes. So the men of Israel took courage. So, all right, God said to continue. And went out against the next day to fight at the same place. Now, I like the fact that they were seeking God and what to do. Okay, I like that. We should always do that. Well, guess what happened? In verse 25 in chapter 20, it says, and that day they lost another 18,000 men, all experienced swordsmen. So 22 and 18, that's how much? How much is that? 40,000 men dropped dead, was killed in battle. And remember, you have 700 sharpshooters. These guys was taking these guys out with ease. Okay, goes on to say, same place again. And that day they lost another 18,000 men, all experienced swordmen. So on Judah's side, their best swordsmen, they got taken out. That's rough. That's rough. Then it goes on to say, so it's like their Marines, right? In like I'm trying to bring it down to our understanding. So in Israel, their Marines got taken out. You sent out your best Marines, they got taken out. Goes on to say, then the entire army went up to Bethel and wept before the Lord and fasted until evening. Because if you know anything about Bethel, Bethel is house of worship. Sheena Wilson has a beautiful song called I think it's called Bethel, actually. And it goes on to say the entire army went up to Bethel and wept before the Lord and fasted until evening. So they're going back to God again. They're seeking God again. They're fasting again. Okay, what is going on? What must we do so that we can finally win this war? Goes on to say that, and they fasted until evening, offering burnt sacrifices and peace offerings. The ark of God was in Bethel in those days. Phinehas, the son of Eleazar and grandson of Aaron, was the priest. The men of Israel asked the Lord, shall we go out again and fight against our brother Benjamin, or shall we stop? And the Lord said, go, for tomorrow I will see to it that you defeat the men of Benjamin. Now God has given them a concrete, definitive, you're going to win. I, the Lord, right here it says, I, the Lord, will see to it. Go, for tomorrow I will see to it that you defeat the men of Benjamin. Now God is not like man that he should lie. So, hey, I would take it too. I would believe it too. Okay? Because he didn't say that the first time. He just said, go. Yeah, continue. Go on and fight them. But this second time, he says, I will see to it that you will defeat the men of Benjamin. Amen. So the Israeli army set an ambush all around the village and went out again on the third day and set themselves in their usual battle formation. When the army of Benjamin came out to the town to attack, the Israeli forces retreated and Benjamin was drawn away from the town as they chased after Israel. And as they had done previously, Benjamin began to kill the men of Israel along the roadway, running between Bethel and Gibeah, so that about 30 of them died. So it just says 30. It didn't say 30,000. It says 30. So that means 30 men died in that battle as they were trying to, flee. But it really wasn't fleeing. They were trying. It was to get them away, further away from the town. Verse 32. Then the army of Benjamin shouted, "We're defeating them again." All right. But the armies of Israel had agreed in advance to. That reminded me again of Idi Amin when his cousin. And it was really good tactic. His cousin not celebrated too early, prematurely, it's safe to say that he would have actually fully toppled, overthrown. Idi Amin Dada would have been overthrown had his cousin not celebrated prematurely. Let me show you what I mean.
Charles Arubey and 3 other fellow Kakwas instigated a coup d'etat. They took up positions in the key areas of the radio, television, and important government houses and thought they had captured power.
Charles Arubey seems on the verge of winning the battle. Amin assembles his troops to launch a counterattack.
I can remember that day our father came in, putting on his revolvers, each and everything. Then for him, he was in the office with other soldiers. So many soldiers came at home in State House. They were going in the meeting like something, but we couldn't know what was going on wrong.
Amin gives his mercenaries the order to surround the building where Arubey and his men have regrouped and to await his orders before killing them. It is midnight. Amin returns to his room. Everything has worked out according to plan. Arubey thought his coup d'etat was a success, but he made the mistake of ceasing combat and going to celebrate the victory with his men in one of the barracks. Meanwhile, Amin Dada's mercenaries spread out quietly all around the area without Arubey's troops realizing it. One by one, all the soldiers posted outside the building are neutralized. Once in position, Amin's men inform him that they are ready to launch the assault. Amin tells them to wait and manages to reach Arubey on the phone inside the barracks.
He called Charles Arubey. And Charles Arubey, when he grabbed the phone, he felt that the gentleman was intoxicated and he seemed to be celebrating. They're talking on phone, and with tears on his eyes while he's talking to me, Dad explained that angle. He said, "My mother gave you to me and told me to look after you. After all this, you want to take power away from me. You come and betray me." And he's crying. I'm talking about my dad. Tears. So he was remembering a very painful thing. Charles Arubey answered, "It is good for Christian who is educated to rule. He said, Charles Arubey, look outside the window. Charles had put his people out. When he looked in the positions, he did not see any of his people. And he saw different vehicles. He said, you are surrounded. Huh? When the phone went off, he called the radio call of the people outside. And they answered him, they just had a bullet inside. He had killed himself. That is a painful truth which, amongst us Kakwas, we had to go through a cultural cleansing because brothers had fought and blood had spilled.
Whether he committed suicide or, more likely, was killed by Amin's men, Charles Arubey is dead. Today, Amin has escaped the most threatening putsch he has ever had to face. But there remains one last thing for him to do before definitely finishing with Charles Arubey. His body had been taken to the Kampala morgue. Amin must now honor a Kakwa's warrior ritual.
If you taste the blood of some of your victims, then you'll be protected. In order to appease the spirit of those you've killed or those who you've brutalized, if you taste their blood, you can cushion your punishment. Amin himself believed in these things.
Nobody was present at the scene, but it is very probable that Amin, as per his beliefs, stuck a knife in Arubey's side to drink a little of his blood and thereby capture his spirit so that it could not avenge itself.
Goes on to say that we're defeating them again, but the armies of Israel had agreed in advance to run away so that the army of Benjamin would chase them and be drawn away from the town. But when the main army of Israel reached Baal Tamar, it turned and attacked, and the 10,000 men in ambush west of Gibeah jumped up from where they were and advanced against the rear of the army of Benjamin, who still didn't realize the impending disaster. So the Lord helped Israel defeat Benjamin, just like he said he would. And the Israeli army killed 25,100 men of Benjamin that day, leaving but a tiny remnant of their forces. So when I got there and it says leaving but a tiny remnant of their forces, this is why even more I'm like, Jamaica must be affiliated with the tribe of Benjamin, because we have a little saying, "Little but with Talawa," and it says right there, 25,100 men of Benjamin were killed that day. Okay, leaving, Israeli army left but a tiny remnant of their forces. So when we Jamaicans say we little, that means we're small. We're a small country. We're a small island of people. We're little bit. But with Talawa. Little but with Talawa. All right. So that's where that's. I don't know if that's where that came from. But man, that's funny. That's just funny. That's just funny. So here's a summary, or as Pastor Lewis would say, summary. So here's a summary of the battle. The army of Israel retreated from the men of Benjamin in order to give the ambush more room for maneuvering. When the men of Benjamin had killed about 30 of the Israelis, they were confident of a massive slaughter, just as on the previous days. But then the men in ambush rushed into the village and slaughtered everybody in it and set it on fire. The great cloud of smoke pouring into the sky was a signal for the Israeli army to turn around and attack the army of Benjamin, who now looked behind them and were terrified to discover that their city was on fire and that they were in serious trouble. So they ran toward the wilderness, but the Israelis chased after them, and the men who had set the ambush came out and joined the slaughter from the rear. They encircled the army of Benjamin east of Gibeah and killed most of them there. 18,000 of the Benjamin troops died in that day's battle. The rest of the army fled into the wilderness toward the rock of Rimmon. But 5,000 were killed along the way, and 2,000 more near Gidom. So the tribe of Benjamin lost 25,000 brave warriors that day, leaving only 600 men who escaped to the rock of Rimmon, where they lived for 4 months. Then the Israeli army returned and slaughtered the entire population of the tribe of Benjamin, men, women, children, and cattle, burned down every city village in the entire land. My God, that's awful. It also reminds me of this ending in chapter 20. Remind me of that story that I read, and we had to all read. It's a part of English, our English lesson in literature. Mice of Men. Kind of, because here it is. You had that husband who knew that his wife was a harlot, played the harlot. And here is Lenny, I believe his name was Lenny, clearly had some form of intellectual disability there, and he accidentally killed this woman. Didn't mean to kill her, right? And this man, the husband of the deceased wife, incited, just chaos within his own community, in his own town, against Lenny and George. And long story short, for those of you who already know the story, but if you don't, long story short, the town was, if I remember correctly, the town was destroyed. Because this one man who knew the truth about his wife and didn't tell the truth. This man did not tell the truth. The men in Gibeah wanted to rape him. They didn't want his wife. They wasn't there for women. They was there for him. They wanted to be with him, a male like them. They wanted to ravish him. And he pushed his wife out there. And then he, the next morning, callous as could be, sees her lifeless body in front of the door on the threshold, tells her to get up, let's go. She doesn't. He picks up her lifeless body, puts it on the back of the donkey, and gets home and cuts her up into pieces. Everybody was doing their own thing, thinking that what they were doing was the right thing. Israel formed the army together, brought the army together to fight on this man's behalf because of what the mob did, and also because of some of what he said wasn't even true. And originally they wanted for Gibeah to give up the mob. So go back to my video with the young lady Deborah, who passed away in a horrific way. Nobody, I think only either one or two persons was actually held accountable for her death. But in the video that I saw, it was a mob that killed her. It wasn't just one or two persons. It was a whole mob that went after her. All because one guy lied on her and saying that she offended their prophet Muhammad. And she never did. You see how much lies are being told here? And you also see how a lie can cause and has caused thousands to die. My God. So I'm going to just finish it up with the last chapter, chapter 21 of Judges. And it goes on to say, the leaders of Israel had vowed at Mizpah never to let their daughters marry a man from the tribe of Benjamin. Jamaica, sorry, Phil. Okay. And it goes on to say, and now the Israeli leaders met at Bethel and sat before God until evening, and weeping bitterly. Verse 3, O Lord God of Israel, they cried out, why has this happened, that now one of our tribes is missing? Yeah, they almost annihilated them. They almost annihilated Benjamin. Wiped them off of them up. It goes on to say, the next morning they were up early and built an altar and offered sacrifices and peace offerings on it. And they said among themselves, was any tribe of Israel not represented when we held our council before the Lord at Mizpah? For at that time it was agreed by solemn oath that anyone who refused to come must die. There was deep sadness throughout all Israel for the loss of their brother tribe, Benjamin. I bet, man. Gone, they kept saying to themselves, gone. An entire tribe of Israel has been cut off and is gone. Because of one man tell one wicked, the thing what the man do, the thing what the Levi do, the man from, what is it? The man who was of the tribe, there was a man of the tribe of Levi, that man. He didn't protect his wife. Okay. But even before I put the blame on him first, because he gets a ton of blame. But his father-in-law, yes, I know the scripture said that she played the harlot, but it doesn't say exactly what she did. In chapter 19, verse 2, but she became angry with him and ran away and returned to her father's home in Bethlehem and was there about 4 months. I believe over here, let me read it in the other translation. Verse 2, chapter 19 from the New King James, but his concubine played the harlot against him and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah and was there for 4 whole months. We don't know exactly what she did, why she's being termed, or why is it being said that she played the harlot. It doesn't really say. And I'm glad it doesn't say. Because you know how we human beings are. We become legalistic with certain things. So we don't know. So the father-in-law, he was messed up for, keeping his son-in-law and his wife beyond their time. That was the first person who gets to blame. Second person who gets blame is, to me, it's just me, is the old man who saw them camping out in the town square. I was like, look, it's not safe here. Okay, come on with me. Great, wonderful. He's practicing hospitality. Bless him for that. However, when this crazy lunatic, sex crazy mob come, I beat on him doing, I try to tear on him doing, I tell about send out the man we're going on to you. We want to know him. He's up there offering his daughter, his virgin daughter, and this man's wife. What is it? I don't understand. What is it with these guys back then in that era? Why they always want to offer up their virgin child, their virgin daughter to sex crazy lunatics? What is that about? And then lastly, the man from the tribe of Levi, he gets the ultimate blame because he didn't protect his wife. He didn't even fight for her. No, I'm sorry. He pushed her out there. So he was a coward. He was a coward. And then was callous. He went to bed nice and comfortable, sleeping very nice and comfortable all night, wrap up in the man house, lie down, asleep and a snore. Wake up the next morning, see him wife, mash up, dip on the ground, mash up, after them just ravish her all night, and come talk about get up and let's go. And then brings her home, she's lifeless, and chops her up into chicken parts. No, sir. That not right. Let me continue. In chapter 21. Yes, let me start here. Gone. They kept saying to themselves, gone. An entire tribe of Israel has been cut off and is gone. And how shall we get wives for the few who remain, since we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them our daughters? Verse 8 and 9. Then they thought again of their oath to kill anyone who refused to come to Mizpah, and discovered that no one had attended from Jabesh Gilead. So they sent 12,000 of their best soldiers to destroy the people of Jabesh Gilead. Why? These guys, they just love destroy. They just love go and just destroy. All the men, married women, and children were slain. But the young virgins of marriageable age were saved. There were 400 of these, and they were brought to the camp at Shiloh. Then Israel sent a peace delegation to the little remnant of the men of Benjamin. You hear that? Little remnant of the men of Benjamin. At Rimmon Rock. The 400 girls were given to them as wives, and they returned to their homes. But there were not enough of these girls for all of them. What a sad time it was in Israel in those days, because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. What shall we do for the wives, for the others, since all the women of the tribe of Benjamin are dead? The leaders of Israel asked. There must be some way to get wives for them, so that an entire tribe of Israel will not be lost forever. But we can't give them our own daughters. We have sworn with a solemn oath that anyone who does this shall be cursed of God. And that's the next thing. They stay making these solemn oaths. Them always just make vows and making these oaths. That's why the Bible telling them, don't be so quick to make a vow, because you're going to regret it. Let me find that for you. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 5. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. Verse 4. Let me start at verse 4. And when you make a vow to God, do not delay in fulfilling it, because he takes no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. And it is better not to vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth cause your flesh to sin, and do not tell the messenger that your vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry with your words and destroy the work of your hands? So, them always I make some kind of vow, man, and they making these vows to me irrationally out of emotions, and just come on, man, come on. Goes on to say, suddenly, verse 19 in chapter 21, suddenly someone thought of the annual religious festival held in the fields of Shiloh between Lebona and Bethel, along the east side of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem. They told the men of Benjamin who still needed wives, "Go and hide in the vineyards, and when the girls of Shiloh come out of their dances, rush out and catch them, and take them home with you to be your wives. And when their fathers and brothers come to us and protest, we will tell them, please be understanding and let them have your daughters, for we didn't find enough wives for them when we destroyed Jabesh Gilead." Who tell them if we're going to destroy Jabesh Gilead? Why? You should have thought of that before you destroyed the place. And it goes on to say, and you couldn't have given your daughters to them without being guilty. Verse 23, so the men of Benjamin did as they were told and kidnapped the girls who took part in the celebration and carried them off to their own land. Then they rebuilt their cities and lived in them. So the people of Israel returned to their homes. Last verse. There was no king in Israel in those days, and every man did whatever he thought was right. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. What a sad three chapters in Judges. Alright, so now that's it. I'm done here, man. I'm done here. There was other things I wanted to get to and read, but I really don't want to make this video any longer than it is. So I'm going to leave with you a commentary from J. Vernon McGee. All right. Until next time, continue to live on purpose, godly purpose. Boom blast!
This happened now, and you'll notice that it moves on to the second stage. And that second stage is an awful stage, moral awfulness. And we have that story now in chapter 19, and it concerns, actually, the tribe of Benjamin. And I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail here, but just to look at something that I think is very important. Chapter 19, verse 1, and it came to pass in those days, when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. Now we have another insight into the life of the people of that day. And this is a good illustration of Romans 1 through 3, by the way. And his concubine played the harlot against him, went away from him unto her father's house to Bethlehem, Judah, and was there 4 whole months. Now imagine this Levite marrying a woman like that, and she leaves him and goes back to her father's house, plays the harlot, and he went after her, and he took her with him, and as he journeyed, they came into the borders of the tribe of Dan, and they were entertained in a home among the Jebusites, and they were of the tribe of Benjamin at that time that were living in Jebus. And what happened was that when they were being entertained, why, the men of the town came in, and they apparently knew something of her reputation to begin with. And what happened was that they, of course, broke in. They absolutely killed her. They apparently raped her and then killed her. Sounds like something that's happening in our country today, does it not? And by the way, the parallel is quite striking as you go through this section. And then what happened was that they killed her, and then they left. And this man, this Levite, was really wrought up. And you know what he did? This reveals how low they were in that day. He took her and cut her up in pieces. And and sent a piece to each tribe with a message of what it was and what had happened to him. And, it caused all the tribes to be incensed. They believed the law should be enforced. They hadn't sunk down quite as far as we have today, where lawlessness is permitted. And unfortunately, of course, it's made a political football, but also there is a tendency today to, we want as little law as possible. And so all the tribes assembled together, and they came against the tribe of Benjamin. And the tribe of Benjamin tried to defend themselves, but they had a tremendous army, apparently. Verse 16 of chapter 20 says this: among all this people, there were 700 chosen men, left-handed, southpaws. Every one could sling stones at a hairbreadth and not miss. Now, a great many people think it's miraculous that David was able to hit Goliath right in the eye. I heard a liberal talk about that for 15 minutes, that he couldn't have been that accurate. Well, read this verse here. They were as accurate in that day as they are today with the missiles, by the way. They had to be much closer, but if they could get in the range of a slingshot, why, it would be fatal for anyone. These men could split a hair, these left-handed men. And when you come to David, you'll find out, and you remember David took 5 stones. And by the way, I heard that same liberal say that he thought if he missed with one, he'd use the other. That wasn't it at all. You know why he took 5 stones? Well, if you read the record very carefully, you'll find out old Goliath had 4 sons that were sitting over there in the army of the Philistines, and David had a stone for each one of them. David didn't need but 1 stone for Goliath. He knew how accurate he was, and he knew how he could use it, but they were overcome by sheer numbers, and actually the tribe of Benjamin was almost destroyed. We're told in verse 44 of chapter 20, and there fell of Benjamin 18,000 men. All these were men of valor. Why? Because of the gross immorality that they had sunk to. And we're told in verse 46, so that all which fell that day of Benjamin were 20, and 5,000 men that drew the sword. All these were men of valor. How tragic it was. This is the favorite tribe, Benjamin, the young son of old Jacob, and the favorite, the one that Judah was willing to lay down his life for. And they occupied a place right next to Judah. But this gross immorality that has taken place, and it's set tribe against tribe, class against class. And what has happened now? Well, it leads to political anarchy. The steps are outlined here very clearly. There was first religious apostasy, way up yonder with Micah's image, Micah's idol. And then it ushered in moral awfulness. It reaches from the temple to the home, and then political anarchy. Those are the steps that any nation takes that goes down. I have a statement in a little book of mine. America needs a declaration of dependence, not independence, but dependence. And, of course, that is on God. I took out of the Wall Street Journal way back in 1928. The clipping actually was sent to me, and it states there that what America needed in the Depression at that time was not some economic arrangement or political move, but needed to return to the days when grandfather thought it was good business to take the team out of the field early on Wednesday evening so that the team could be hitched up to the wagon in which Grandma put the children with their scrub faces, and they all went off to the little church down at the crossroads for prayer meeting on Wednesday night, and they thought it was good business even in the time of harvest. That was something said by that Wall Street Journal. May I say to you, if that was true then, certainly true today. Where did our trouble begin? Our trouble is primarily spiritual. Goes back. Actually, it goes back to the church. The church went into apostasy. Then it's entered the home. And we talk about the drug problem. We talk about the generation gap. Then it's moved up into political anarchy today. And we hear so much about if we could just change this and put this party in. And my friend, all of that is perfect nonsense that we're hearing on television in these days. What we need today is to get back to a spiritual foundation. That's where our trouble began, and that's where we went off the track. God have mercy on America today. May I say to you, this happens to be the philosophy of history. The hoop of history is still rolling, and I'm disturbed because it's never changed. And we are today in the midst of political anarchy.